The challenge. The arena was alive with noise, thousands of voices echoing against the tall stone walls, banners of alien houses waving in the cold wind, and bright lights shining down on the center ground. The crowd had come for blood. They had come to see the weakness of a human, and they were eager to laugh. At the center stood a woman, tall, armored, and proud. Her name was Commander Vela, known across the galaxy for her strength. Her blade was forged from star metal, heavy and glowing with strange runes. She held it with one hand, as if it weighed nothing. Her eyes burned with confidence as she looked at her opponent. Across from her stood the human. His name was Captain Jaren, but to most in the arena, he was simply the human. His armor was simple, scratched from battle, and his weapon looked plain, a simple blade without glow or runes. The alien crowd began to shout insults, laughing at how weak the weapon looked. Vela raised her voice, her words sharp and cruel. "You call it a blade, human? That thin piece of metal? It is no better than scrap." The crowd roared with laughter, repeating her words, mocking the human. Jaren did not reply. His face was calm, his eyes steady. His silence only made the aliens laugh louder. The sound of a great horn cut through the air. The duel was declared. It was time to fight. Vela lifted her glowing blade and pointed it at Jaren. She was certain this battle would be quick. She wanted to humiliate him before killing him. For her, this was not just a fight. It was a show. But Jaren slowly bent down. His movement was calm, deliberate. Everyone in the arena grew quiet. What was he doing? He placed his simple blade on the ground, letting it fall with a soft metallic sound. The crowd was confused. Vela frowned. Then Jaren spoke, his voice low but clear enough for all to hear. "Too light for me." His words cut through the silence like thunder. The crowd gasped. Whispers spread like fire. "Too light? What does he mean?" they asked one another. Commander Vela's frown deepened. Her pride felt wounded by the human's strange words. Did he dare mock her duel? Did he think himself above this fight? With anger in her voice, she shouted, "You mock me, human? You dare disrespect the weapon in your hand." But Jaren only stepped closer. His calm face never changed. His voice carried again. "A true blade is not measured by its glow, not by its weight, not by the crowd's laughter. A true blade is measured by the strength to lift it when the world thinks you cannot." His words silenced even the cruelest voices in the stands. The arena grew heavy with tension. The human walked toward a massive sword displayed as a trophy near the dueling ground. It was an alien war sword, so large and heavy that no one in the commander's guard could lift it without machines. The crowd had seen it before, shining, untouchable, more symbol than weapon. Jaren placed his hands around its handle. The audience burst into laughter again. Vela smirked, certain the human would fail. His muscles tightened, his arms strained for a moment. And then, slowly, the impossible happened. The sword began to move. Dust fell from its edges as it rose from the ground. The crowd gasped as one. Jaren lifted the war sword completely, holding it across his shoulders as if it was not a burden. His chest rose and fell with calm breaths. His eyes never left Vela. The commander felt something she had never felt before. Hesitation. The alien crowd was in shock. Their laughter was gone, replaced by silence and awe. Some even leaned forward in disbelief. The human was holding the sword as if it belonged to him. Vela gripped her own blade tighter. Her pride was struck, but also something deeper. She was the strongest in her ranks. Yet this human, mocked as weak, was lifting a blade meant for giants. She shouted loudly, trying to hide her fear. "Strength is nothing without skill. Human, you may hold it, but can you wield it?" Jaren's calm voice replied, "You will see." The horns sounded again, marking the true start of the duel. The crowd erupted, half in rage, half in excitement. The alien commander prepared herself, her pride demanding victory. But deep inside, she knew this fight would not be the simple show she had promised. The human had changed everything with a single act. The challenge was no longer about a duel. It was about what humans truly were. The crowd leaned forward, hungry to see the answer. And so, with the weight of galaxies on his shoulders and a weapon too heavy for any alien, the The human stepped forward, calm, steady, unshaken. The arena held its breath. The challenge had begun. The weight of power. The ground shook as Jaren stepped forward, the giant war sword resting across his shoulders like it was no heavier than a bag of grain. The alien crowd, once loud with mockery, now stared in stunned silence. Their eyes followed his every move, their laughter gone, their voices caught in their throats. The air itself felt different, heavy with tension. Commander Vela's pride burned hotter than fire. She had mocked him, called his weapon a toy, called him weak. Yet here he stood, carrying a weapon that her strongest warriors could not move. She tightened her grip on her glowing star metal blade, the runes along its edge pulsing with light. She refused to be intimidated. She was a commander, undefeated, feared across 3 systems. She would not be humiliated by a single human. "Do you think holding it makes you powerful?" Vela shouted, her voice carrying across the arena. Her eyes narrowed as she stepped closer, the glow of her blade painting sharp lines across her armor. Strength without skill is nothing. Human, a child can lift a stone, but it takes a warrior to wield it. Jaren lowered the sword slowly, letting it rest in both his hands. His face remained calm, his eyes steady. He did not look at the crowd. He did not care for their judgment. His gaze was locked only on Vela. His voice, deep and steady, carried across the silence. Power is not about lifting. Power is about what you do when the weight tries to crush you. The crowd murmured his words. Some alien scoffed. Others nodded, unsure why the human's voice carried such weight. They had seen warriors roar with power, but this man spoke with calm fire, and somehow it cut deeper. Vela lunged, her blade glowing like a comet as it sliced through the air. Sparks erupted as her strike met the massive war sword in Jaren's hands. The sound was like thunder, the clash echoing through the arena. Dust rose from the ground, the shockwave making the closest spectators stumble back. The human did not fall. He stood his ground, pushing back against her blow. The war sword in his hands moved with force, not sluggish but steady. His arms trembled, yet his grip did not break. The alien commander's eyes widened. She had expected him to crumble under her strike, but he held her, as if he had been born for this very moment. The duel became a storm, strike after strike, steel against star metal. Every swing sent sparks into the air. Each impact shook the earth beneath their feet. The alien crowd could not look away. The laughter that once mocked him was replaced by awe. Their voices grew into gasps and shouts, some cheering for their commander, others whispering about the human's impossible endurance. Jaren fought with raw power, but there was something else, something the crowd could not name. He was not just strong, he was relentless. Every time Vela tried to break his guard, he adapted. His movements were not elegant, but they were alive. Each strike carried history, as if his body remembered 1,000 battles, as if survival itself had trained him. Vela pushed harder, anger mixing with a strange feeling she did not want to admit, fear. She increased her speed, her blade a blur of glowing light. She spun, slashed, thrust with precision, tried to overwhelm him with technique, but every time the war sword met her strike, every time his feet dug into the ground, and he refused to fall. "Why do you not break?" she shouted in frustration, sweat on her brow, sparks flying from another clash. Jaren's reply was simple, his voice calm between strikes. "Because humans do not break, we bend, we endure, we rise again." The crowd erupted at his words. Some shouted angrily, unwilling to hear such pride from a human. But others, even aliens who despised mankind, felt something stir in their chests. It was not just a fight. It was a truth spoken in steel and blood. The commander's anger grew. She summoned the hidden energy of her blade, the runes glowing brighter, flaring with ancient power. The ground cracked under the force of her strike as she drove the blade down with all her strength. The human caught it. The war sword in his hands shuddered under the pressure. His knees bent, his arms shook. For a moment, the crowd thought he would fall. Vela smiled, certain victory was hers. But then Jaren roared, not with anger but with defiance. His body surged, his arms rose, and with impossible force he threw her strike aside. The shockwave of the clash tore cracks into the ground, sending dust flying into the air. The alien commander stumbled back, her armor dented, her arms trembling from the backlash. She stared at him in disbelief. For the first time in her life, she felt herself falter. Jaren stepped forward, his war sword glowing faintly from the heat of the clash. His voice carried once more, calm and steady. "You wanted to see strength. Now you will see the weight of power." The arena was silent. The alien commander's pride was wounded, her confidence shaken. The crowd, once united in mockery, was now divided between fear and admiration. The human stood tall, his war sword steady, his breath strong. He had proven more than strength. He had shown that when the galaxy pressed down on a human, they did not collapse, they endured, and in enduring, they rose stronger. The duel was far from over, but already the story of this battle had begun to spread beyond the walls of the arena. A whisper that would echo across stars. The weight of power was now in human hands. Clash of pride. The clash of weapons echoed again and again, the sound rolling across the arena like thunder. Sparks burst with every strike. The ground trembled, and dust filled the air. The alien crowd leaned forward in their seats, their eyes wide, their voices shouting. Some cried for Vela's victory. Others whispered about the human who refused to fall. Commander Vela's pride burned like fire. She was a commander of the Valkor fleets, undefeated in 100 duels, feared across the outer systems. Never had she been pushed back. Never had she been forced to fight this hard. Yet here stood a human, a creature she once thought weak, holding a sword meant for giants, matching her strike for strike. Her blade glowed brighter, her speed faster. She lunged, slashed, spun with practiced precision. Her moves were graceful, honed through years of training. Each strike should have cut through her enemy, but Jaren blocked, parried, pushed back with raw power. His movements were not refined, but they were alive, unpredictable, unyielding. The crowd gasped as he ducked under a glowing strike, swinging the heavy war sword upward in a wide arc. The force of his attack knocked Vela back, her boots sliding across the stone floor. For the first time in the arena's history, their commander stumbled. Her face flushed with anger. She shouted through gritted teeth, "You fight like a beast, human, wild and clumsy. You cannot win against true skill." Jaren's eyes narrowed. His voice was calm, carried by steady breath. "Skill means nothing if pride blinds you. I fight to survive. You fight to be seen." The words struck her deeper than the blade. For a heartbeat, her rhythm faltered, and Jaren's sword slammed against her guard. The impact rang like a bell. The arena shivered. The crowd roared, split between fury and awe. Some aliens hissed, demanding their commander crush him. Others stared in silence, their minds shaken. This was no weak human. This was something else, something they had never understood. Vela forced herself to regain control. Her pride screamed at her. She could not lose. She would not be humiliated. Her people were watching. Her enemies were watching. She raised her blade again, summoning energy into its runes. The light burned white, wrapping around her weapon like fire. She charged forward, each strike faster than before, sparks flying in showers. Jaren was forced back step by step. His muscles strained. Sweat poured across his brow. His breaths grew heavier, yet his eyes never wavered. His grip on the war sword never loosened. The commander smirked through her rage, thinking she had him. "You are slowing, human. You cannot hold forever." Jaren's voice came through the storm, low but steady. "Humans don't hold forever. We hold long enough to turn weakness into strength." Then, with a roar, he twisted his stance, letting her strike slide off the war sword, and countered with a swing that split the air. The massive blade slammed in her guard. The shock rattled through her bones. Her knees bent. She fell back again. The crowd gasped, louder this time. A ripple of disbelief spread through the stands. Could their commander be losing? Could a human truly stand equal to her? Her pride howled inside her chest. She had mocked him at the start, mocked his thin blade, mocked his presence. Now every word felt like a shadow pressing against her. If she lost, Her shame would echo forever. If she faltered, the galaxy would remember. She screamed, throwing herself forward with all her fury. The glow of her blade blazed so bright it hurt the eyes. Strike after strike fell like lightning. Jaren met each one, his arms trembling, his legs buckling, but he did not yield. He roared back with every clash, defiance burning in his voice. Steel and star metal clashed until the sound became a rhythm, a heartbeat of war. The arena was filled with smoke, sparks, and shouts. The duel was no longer just a fight. It was a war of pride. Finally, with one brutal strike, Jaren locked his war sword against hers. The two blades pressed together, grinding, the energy between them burning the stone beneath their feet, their faces inches apart, eyes locked. Vela's voice shook with rage. "You are nothing, human, nothing compared to the pride of my people." Jaren's reply was quiet, calm, and it pierced deeper than any weapon. "Then your pride is weaker than you think." With a sudden surge, he pushed forward, breaking the lock. His blade slammed against hers, knocking it high into the air. For a breath, the commander stood unguarded. The crowd gasped as silence fell. But Jaren did not strike. He lowered his weapon, his chest rising with steady breath. His voice echoed across the arena. "This fight is not about pride. It is about truth, and truth does not break." The silence in the crowd deepened. Aliens who had come to laugh were now staring with wide eyes. The clash of pride had shifted. The human was no longer just an opponent. He had become something more. Vela clenched her teeth, rage boiling. Yet inside her, respect began to grow like an unwanted seed. For the first time in her life, her pride trembled. And the crowd knew it. They saw the shift. They felt the storm. The clash of pride was no longer one-sided. It was a war that could shake the galaxy. The mock turns to respect. The dust of battle hung heavy in the air, drifting like smoke around the dueling ground. The arena was filled with silence, broken only by the sound of heavy breaths. Commander Vela stood with her blade lowered, her chest rising and falling as she glared at the human. Her pride screamed at her to strike again, to end this fight, to prove her strength. Yet her arms trembled, her grip felt weak, and in her heart a strange feeling stirred. She remembered her words at the beginning, the cruel mockery she had thrown like knives. "You call that a blade?" She had laughed, mocking the thin weapon he carried. The crowd had cheered her insult, feeding her pride. But now, as she looked at Jaren, standing steady with a massive war sword in his hands, those words came back to her like chains around her throat. The human had turned her mockery into silence. He had turned her laughter into fear. Every strike she had thrown, he had endured. Every insult she had spoken, he had crushed with calm truth. Vela clenched her teeth, trying to bury the seed of respect growing inside her chest. She was a commander. She was not meant to respect an enemy, especially not a human. Jaren's voice broke the silence, calm, steady, carrying across the arena. "You mocked the blade, but you forgot the hand that holds it." His words were sharp, not shouted, but heavy. They fell on the crowd like hammers. The aliens who once cheered Vela now sat frozen, listening. The commander's eyes burned. Her pride wanted to deny him, but her body remembered the clash. Her bones still ached from the force of his strikes. Her pride told her to hate him, but her heart whispered another truth. He was no weak human. He was no joke. He was a warrior who stood equal. She raised her blade again, but this time her voice did not mock. It carried something else, something she had never spoken to an enemy before. "You fight well, human, too well." The crowd gasped. They had never heard such words from her lips. She had praised no opponent, not once. Yet now she stood with her blade glowing, her voice steady, and her eyes watching Jaren with respect she could not hide. Jaren's reply came with the calm of a soldier who had seen too much war. "We fight because we must, not because we want glory. We fight because survival leaves no choice." His words were not spoken with pride, but with truth, and the truth struck harder than any blade. Vela attacked again, her strikes faster, sharper, but her eyes had changed. She no longer fought only to humiliate him. She fought to test him, to see how far he could go. She wanted to know if this human's words were as strong as his sword. Each clash sent sparks across the ground, each blow a question, and each block an answer. The crowd watched in awe, their cheers fading into silence as they realized the fight had shifted. What began as a mockery had become a trial. Their commander's pride was no longer fueled by hatred, but by a burning respect she could not contain. Jaren pressed forward, his strength forcing her back. She stumbled again, and once more the human stopped. He did not strike her down when he had the chance, his blade lowered, his voice steady. Killing you proves nothing. Fighting you proves everything. Her heart clenched at his words. Her pride wanted to scream, but the respect was too strong now. Her mocking laughter felt like a memory from another life. Something inside her broke, and she whispered through heavy breaths, "Then show me, human, show me the truth of your people." The duel raged on, but it no longer felt the same. Vela fought with all her skill, her pride still driving her. But under it all there was a fire of respect that grew with every strike. She could not admit it aloud. Not yet. But in her heart she knew this human was no ordinary warrior. The crowd could feel it too. They shifted uneasily, unsure if they should cheer or stay silent. The story they were watching was no longer about a weak human being humiliated. It was about something far greater, something that frightened them. Commander Vela, the undefeated, had mocked a human, and now that same human was forcing her to respect him. Her words at the start of the duel echoed in her mind, but this time they sounded hollow. They were no longer truth, they were only pride. And as the clash continued, as steel and star metal sang together in thunder, the crowd realized something terrifying. The fight had already changed, not because of who would win, but because of what had been proven. The mock had turned into respect, and once respect begins, it cannot be taken back. Breaking the limits. The arena floor was cracked and scarred, dust rising in thin clouds with every heavy step. The duel had gone far beyond what anyone expected. It was no longer a test of skill, no longer a show for the crowd. It had become something greater, a clash of spirit. Commander Vela's pride burned like fire, but the flame of respect inside her refused to die. She could not deny the truth anymore. The human was more than she believed. Her blade glowed brighter than before, runes shining with a fierce light. The ancient power within it stirred as she called upon her last reserves. Energy surged through her veins, her speed doubled, her strikes sharper, faster, more brutal. Each blow was meant to end the fight, to prove once and for all that she was still the strongest. The crowd erupted with wild cheers as the glow of her blade lit the arena. Her people shouted her name, their voices desperate for her to crush the human. The air pulsed with energy, the ground trembled under the force of her attacks. But Jaren did not step back, he did not surrender. He did not falter, his arms shook, sweat dripped from his brow. Blood marked his skin, yet every time her glowing blade fell, his war sword rose to meet it. Every clash screamed through the arena like thunder. Every spark painted the dust-filled air with fire. Vela's strikes were faster than light, but Jaren's endurance was deeper than stone. He bent under her power, but he did not break. His breath came ragged, his body pushed to its edge, yet his eyes still burned with calm fire. "Why do you keep standing?" Vela shouted, fury and disbelief mixing in her voice. "No one endures this long, not even my own warriors." Jaren's voice came rough, broken by the weight of battle, but steady, because humans endure what others cannot. We do not stop when strength fails, we go beyond. The crowd gasped at his words. They could see it in him. His body was at its limit. Yet still he moved, still he fought. The aliens whispered in disbelief. He should have fallen already. How does he still stand? The commander struck harder. Her glowing blade cut across the arena like lightning. Jaren caught it, his arms trembling under the weight. His knees buckled, his body screamed with pain. But then he roared, a roar not of rage, but of survival. His strength surged again, breaking through the edge of exhaustion. The crowd stood to their feet as the human pushed forward, his blade rising with impossible force. Vela stumbled back, her armor cracked, her breath ragged. For the first time in her life, she felt it. Not just respect, not just fear, but the realization that she was not invincible. Jaren pressed his attack, his movements raw, wild, but filled with unshakable resolve. Each strike was heavy, each swing like a storm. His body bled, his muscles tore, but his spirit carried him. He was breaking through the limits of flesh, fueled only by will. The commander shouted in defiance, summoning every last spark of power from her blade. Her strikes became desperate, fueled by fear as much as pride. The light of her weapon filled the arena like a burning sun. Yet even that light could not blind the truth. The human was still standing. The clash reached its peak, two warriors fighting not just each other, but their own limits. Sparks rained like fire. Dust rose like smoke. The crowd roared like thunder. The ground cracked under their feet. And in that storm, Jaren spoke again, his voice rising above the chaos. You think power is in strength. You think victory is in pride. But humans carry something greater. We carry the will to go beyond the end. With one final strike, he drove his war sword forward. The force of it shook the arena. Vela's blade met it. But her arms trembled, her power flared, then faltered. The runes flickered, her grip broke, and the impact sent her sprawling across the cracked ground. The crowd fell silent. The glow of her blade dimmed, its power drained, its pride broken. Commander Vela lay on the ground, her chest rising and falling, her armor cracked, her body shaking. She looked up at the human still standing, barely able to hold himself, but unbroken. Her voice came weak, but honest. You should have fallen. You should be dead. Jaren lifted his blade with trembling arms, his breath heavy, his body nearly broken. Yet his eyes were calm as he answered, Humans don't stop when they should. That is why we survive. The silence in the arena deepened. The crowd no longer shouted, no longer mocked. They stood frozen, staring at the human who had endured what no one else could. Commander Vela closed her eyes for a moment, her pride screaming, but her heart admitting what her lips could not deny. The human had gone beyond limits, and in doing so, he had shattered hers. Victory at the edge. The arena was silent except for the echo of their breaths. The ground beneath them was broken, scarred by the clash of steel and star metal. Cracks stretched across the stone floor, and dust floated in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Two figures remained at the center, one standing tall, with trembling legs, the other on her knees, her blade dimmed and heavy. Commander Vela's pride roared within her, telling her to rise, to strike again. But her body betrayed her, her arms felt like lead, her chest heaved, and her blade, once glowing with power, now flickered like a dying star. She looked up at the human who still stood, battered, bleeding, his breath ragged, yet his grip on the war sword firm. The crowd, thousands of voices, had gone quiet. The mockery was gone, the laughter erased. In its place was awe and fear and something else, respect. They had expected the human to fall within moments. Instead, he had endured longer than any warrior they had seen. And now, against their commander, he stood unbroken. Jaren's eyes burned with steady fire. His body screamed with pain, but his spirit carried him beyond it. He stepped forward slowly, the war sword dragging across the ground, its weight shaking the earth. Vela forced herself to stand, her pride refusing to let her kneel in defeat. Her blade rose, shaking in her hands, the runes struggling to hold their glow. The two warriors faced each other once more, one fueled by unshakable will, the other by pride refusing to surrender. Their weapons rose, and for one final time, they clashed. The sound was like a storm breaking. The force of the impact cracked the ground beneath their feet. Dust and sparks burst into the air. The crowd shielded their eyes from the flash of light. When it cleared, Vela staggered backward, her blade flying from her hands, spinning across the stone floor. Gasps filled the arena. The sound of her weapon hitting the ground echoed louder than the horns of war. Vela fell to her knees, her eyes wide with shock for the first time in her life. Her blade was gone, her pride shattered. Jaren stood before her, his war sword heavy in his hands. He could have struck, he could have ended her life and claimed victory. The crowd waited for it, holding their breath. But instead, Jaren did something no one expected. He dropped the war sword, letting it fall with a thunderous crash at her feet. The arena shook with the weight of it. His voice carried across the silence, calm and unshaken. "Too heavy for you, too light for me." The words cut deeper than any strike. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some shouted in fury, others in awe. They could not believe what they had seen. The commander, their undefeated warrior, disarmed and humbled. The human, bloodied but standing, choosing mercy over pride. Vela's chest rose and fell as she stared at him. Her pride wanted to scream, to deny, to strike with bare hands. But her heart knew the truth. The human had won, not just with strength, but with something greater. He had fought beyond limits. And when victory was his, he showed restraint. That was a power she could not understand, but could no longer ignore. Slowly, with trembling hands, she bowed her head, not in humiliation, but in acknowledgement. The crowd gasped again. Their commander had never bowed to anyone, not even in victory. Yet here she was, her head lowered to a human. Jaren did not smile. He did not raise his arms in triumph. He simply stood, his breath heavy, his eyes calm. His voice carried one last time. Victory is not in pride. Victory is in truth, and truth cannot be broken. The crowd fell silent. The arena that once roared with laughter now held its breath in awe. The duel was over, and the story of it was already becoming legend. Vela looked up, her voice weak but honest. "Human, today you have shown me what I did not believe. You are more than strength, more than stubborn will. You are unbreakable." The words spread like fire through the crowd. Aliens who had once mocked humans now repeated the word, unbreakable, whispered from mouth to mouth. A new fear, a new respect had been born in the galaxy. The human turned, walking away from the broken arena, his steps heavy but steady behind him. The commander remained kneeling. Her pride changed into something new. The duel was finished, but its echoes would reach far beyond this place. It was victory at the edge, not just of battle, but of history, the legacy of the duel. The arena stood in silence long after the clash had ended. Dust drifted through the broken air. Cracks ran deep across the stone floor, and sparks still glowed faintly from shattered edges of steel. But the fight was over. Commander Vela knelt with her head bowed, her blade fallen, her pride shattered, and before her stood the human who had changed everything. Jaren did not raise his arms in triumph. He did not call for cheers or recognition. He simply stood, his chest heaving, his body bruised and bleeding, but his spirit unbroken. His war sword lay on the ground beside him, silent and heavy. His voice had already spoken the truth, and that truth echoed louder than any roar of victory. The crowd, thousands of aliens from every corner of the Empire, whispered in disbelief. They had come to mock, to laugh at the weakness of humans. Instead, they had seen endurance beyond reason, strength beyond limits, and mercy where none expected it. Their commander, undefeated for years, had bowed her head not in defeat, but in respect. That sight alone was enough to carve the moment into legend. Whispers spread like fire, unbreakable. The word passed from one voice to another, first as disbelief, then as awe, then as fear. The arena that once rang with mockery now trembled with the birth of a new tale, the tale of a human who had stood against a giant and proved that pride could break, but will could not. Commander Vela rose slowly, her eyes locked on Jaren. Her voice carried across the silence, low but steady. "Human, you have taken from me what no one else could. You shattered my pride, but in its place you left something greater." She paused, her chest rising with deep breath. "Respect." The crowd gasped again. Vela had never spoken such words to anyone, not even her own generals. Yet here she stood, armor cracked, weapon gone, and before her was a human who had earned not only her respect, but her fear. Jaren gave no reply. His silence was louder than words. He turned and walked toward the gates of the arena, each step heavy but sure. The sound of his boots against the broken stone echoed in the silence. Every alien I followed him, their gazes filled with a mixture of fear, wonder, and a dawning realization. This was not just one human. This was a glimpse of what humanity could be. If one man could stand against their commander and endure, what would an army of such men do? What would a world of such people mean for the galaxy? The thought unsettled them, and yet it burned into their minds, impossible to forget. Vela remained at the center of the arena long after he was gone. Her warriors rushed to her side, but she lifted a hand and stopped them. Her pride was gone, but she did not feel shame. Instead, she felt something new, a fire she had never known. She had seen truth, and it had come from the most unlikely place. Her words carried to her soldiers, to her people, and to the crowd. Today, you witnessed more than a duel. Today, you saw the truth of humanity. They're not weak. They're not fragile. They are dangerous. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy, filled with the weight of her admission. For her people, it was a warning. For the galaxy, it was a prophecy. Far beyond the arena, the story began to spread. It traveled with every witness, carried on every voice. Each retelling added more fire to the tale. A human stood against Commander Vela, they said. A human lifted the war sword. A human refused to fall. A human showed mercy when victory was his. The words grew with every step, turning from whispers into legend. On distant worlds, in halls of power, in the dark rooms of empires, leaders would hear this tale. Some would laugh, some would fear, but none would ignore it. Humanity had been underestimated for too long. That time was now over. And for Jaren, he did not think of the crowd, or the whispers, or the legend. He walked with steady steps, each one heavier than the last, his body broken, but his spirit carrying him forward. He had not come for glory. He had not come for respect. He had come because he had no choice, because survival demanded it. Yet behind him, a legacy had been born, a legacy that no blade, no pride, no empire could erase. The duel was finished, but the story had only begun. The galaxy would remember this day, the day a human stood unbroken, the day pride bent to will, the day mercy revealed power, the day humanity showed the stars that they were not weak, but unbreakable.